Now, we're going to go to break in a minute. I want to segue into my guest, who's Niara Isley. And I'm just going to tell you a story before we go to break. And this has to do with an interview that I did of a woman who was in the United States Air Force from 1978 to 1982, almost exactly the years that Niara was in the Air Force. This lady had a top secret clearance. I don't know what she did. I do know that when she was discharged from the military out of Okinawa in 1982, she went through an extended debriefing period. I've occasionally talked about this. I'm just going to mention it here. Her debriefing period, she said to me, lasted an exceptionally long period of time. I think she said months. And it went through 3 phases. Phase 1, she called counseling. That is, she sat across from a debriefing officer, and it was essentially, let's get your story straight. When you go to the outside world, you don't tell them you did this, you're going to tell them you did that. Get it? Got it? Good. Okay. Stage 2 was very, very unpleasant. Stage 2, she was given sodium pentothal and tortured. And the whole idea was for interrogators to find out that if she were captured by Russians or North Koreans or whomever, or Chinese, and if she were tortured, what would she give up? What information was at risk? And then stage 3, which she said was better than stage 2. I didn't think so after she described it to me. Stage 3 was she was brought into a room. Men in civilian clothing, they were very nice to her. They sat her down in a chair. They put a helmet on her head. The helmet was attached by wires to a device, a machine, which had knobs and switches and whatnot, and they scrambled up her memory. They scrambled up her head. I asked her, were you able to remember things before your time in the military? She said, I honestly can't say. That was literally what she said. But the point is, that was technology 1982. They had the ability to completely screw up her head, manage her memory. And even back then, this is before my first book was published. I was a nobody. No one knew who I was. I was just meeting with this woman. She just gave me the story. What I wanted to know then and what I'd like to know now is how widespread is this type of nonsense? This is 30 plus years ago. You have to know that this has been done many times to our servicemen and servicewomen. That their minds have been screwed with, their memories have been managed, and ask yourself just how criminal a behavior that is, and just how significant the political repercussions would be if this behavior were ever outed in a convincing way. My next guest, Niara Isley, is going to be talking about that and many, many other things, all from her book, her excellent book, Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light. We're going to come back to her in a few minutes. I am Richard Dolan. Let's all smile and take a break. Catch you in a few minutes. Welcome back. I'm Richard Dolan. You're on KGRA Radio. I'm here with my guest, Niara Isley. Before we get started, I just want to make a statement / promo for something that I will be doing in about 3 weeks now, and this is called the Modern Knowledge Tour. This is Canada's first nationwide tour on alternative information. The tour will be featuring myself, along with Michael Tellinger, who's another one of the world's leading speakers, I guess we could say, in the alternative knowledge field, and a number of other individuals. Linda Moulton Howe will be there. Stanton Friedman will be there, among some of the more well-known UFO luminaries, along with other experts dealing with subjects such as GMO foods, banking and corporate fraud, ET/UFOs, government cover-ups, ancient archaeology, consciousness, occult symbolism, pyramid power, much, much more. This is going to be 11, possibly 12 cities across Canada, from Halifax to Vancouver. We are going across the country in a big old RV, if you can believe it. It'll take about 3.5 weeks. I believe a lot of this is going to be YouTubed up, a lot of the trip. In other words, kind of like a video diary. But we're going to be doing 11 to 12 cities in Canada. If you are in Canada now, and if you're going to be in Canada in a month, last week of May, first 2 weeks of June, go visit www.modernknowledge2014.com. and you can get your tickets, and you can see the schedule and what cities are available and so forth. I have a guest here. I want to introduce her. I'm actually going to let her introduce herself for the most part, but this is a woman that I consider not simply a colleague but a friend. I've known her for Oh, maybe close on 5 years now. We've had a couple of very, very excellent conversations. She knows that I have nothing but respect for her. She was in the United States Air Force from 1979, and she may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think until 1983. But she's had a lot of other interactions with the U.S. military, and she'll be able to tell you about that. And I think one other thing I want to say about this particular book that she's written, it's a brand new book. It's called Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light, subtitled A Journey of Spirit Retrieval and Awakening. I'm a very critical reader of the UFO library that's out there, and I receive manuscripts myself all the time. I am a small-time publisher. So I'm always sort of mentally ranking books as in terms of the readability and how well they're put together and organized. And I have to say, this is really a very fine book. Niara Isley is a really good writer. She's organized. She knows how to put her thoughts together. This is, I mean, this sounds so unusual, but many people in this field, they go self-published route, and they don't know how to do it. And Niara is not simply a extremely insightful person, but she's actually totally coherent and a good writer, and she knows how to tell her story in a way that's very compelling. I found myself reading this book and not putting it down, and it's absolutely fascinating, riveting. So I'm very proud and happy to have Niara Isley. Niara, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Richard, and thank you for that wonderful build-up on my book. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's absolutely heartfelt, and I just want people to know the book is available on Amazon.com. You can look it up, Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light. There are 11 reviews on Amazon right now. They are all exceptionally positive. So you've got a lot of readers who are being quickly won over and very enthusiastic. You don't get that every day with a book.
Yeah. So I've gotten very, very great feedback, not just on Amazon, but from emails, people that are reading the book. They're all saying they can't put it down, and that's exactly what a writer wants to hear.
Absolutely.
So that's cool.
And also, now, I mean, we'll be getting into your specific experiences, which include encounters with human and non-human abductors, and among many other things. So in that sense, this book can count as part of the MILAB library, books that deal with military abductions. And on that basis alone, I would have to say this is one of the very top books that's ever been written on that subject. There are a couple of other people who have had military abduction experiences, and their works are very important. But I think this book takes its place immediately as a must-read for anyone who has an interest in this phenomenon, which we call military abductions. So,
yeah, well,
well
I wrote the book primarily for my own healing. I mean, I was shushed by friends and family for so many years. Please don't talk about those weird experiences. They're too far outside the box. And so for a long time, I tried to do that. In fact, when my memories first came back in 1994, I kind of laugh about this now, but back then I said, geez, if I ever go public with this, the only job I'm going to be able to get is speaking at UFO conferences.
Pretty much, right? Exactly.
Here I am. But it took me 14 years. 14 years I dug in my heels and said, no, I am not going public. But the whole time I was putting together all my research because I was just driven to find out what the heck is this about, why did it happen, and what political and social context could it possibly happen. And I was just trying so hard to figure that all out during those 14 years.
Well, in reading your book, I just found that you had a perspective that, at least for me, was completely compatible with my own perspective on pretty much everything there. And one of the phrases that I know that you use in this book was paradigm shattering, which is a concept that I've often thought of in connection with this entire strange, crazy subject of UFOs and ETs. And when one gets involved in a field that is paradigm shattering, which this is, and your experiences are paradigm shattering, it's very hard, isn't it, to kind of have your feet in both worlds very easily. You're either in one or the other, it seems to me, and it looks like that you've had to make that decision yourself.
Well, I have had a foot in both worlds, but the foot on 3D planet Earth hasn't been the most comfortable one. because, people just don't want to accept these experiences. And I took, basically a fairly scientific approach to investigating my experiences from a layperson standpoint. I thought, okay, I have these weird and terrifying memories now from this hypnosis session with Bud Hopkins. What am I going to do with it? And I thought, okay, well, I didn't want to believe it either, because nobody, when they're confronted with that kind of abuse, wants to believe that other human beings can be that inhumane to another one of their own kind.
Well, let's start. I'm sorry to jump in, but I'm actually itching to get going, and I think people listening really want to hear you talk about your story.
Sure.
In recounting your life experiences here, there are a couple of key events that really seem to stand out. You talked a bit about an event when you were a very small girl, age 4, and you have some recollection of that. You talked about as a very young woman around the age in your early 20s when you were married to a gentleman in Germany. He was in the military. And you had it was a very unusual experience there.
Oh, yes.
And I'd love it for us to talk about that. And then you had, and how that whole memory came back. And then you had an experience, of course, when you were in the United States Air Force at the Nevada test site, in which you lost 3 months of time.
Yes.
3 months of time.
At least 3 months, yeah.
At least. So I don't know what you're most comfortable starting with, but I would love for us to be able to get into all of that. And I think that there's a lot of other issues that are going to come naturally in the wake of those. I guess I would ask you, an instinct's leading me to the time when you were in your early 20s. You're in Germany, and I wonder if you might describe this. How would you like to describe it? How would you like to tell the story of your life? Maybe I should just let you do that.
Yeah.
Why don't you just go?
Okay. I did want to say that with my experiences, I know some of them are really fantastic. So I went out and I gathered all kinds of data, thinking I would find data that would either support them or not support them. And I found way more data that supported my experiences than not.
Okay.
So that's why I kind of wanted to start with that, so that people understand that I didn't just latch on to all of this stuff and run with it. I had to be convinced myself.
I would just say, jumping in, that having now spent some time with you on a number of occasions and gotten to know you to some reasonable extent, that I would think that anyone who really meets you and gets to know you would trust your judgment and know that you're someone of integrity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as far as starting, things started in childhood. That dream at 4 years old where I was taken out and put under a street lamp, that was a big red flag for Bud Hopkins, because when people are under a light, they're usually being examined by these grays with the big eyes. And indeed, that was what was happening, and I was really terrified.
Can you describe this a little more for people who are listening?
Yeah. Yeah, when I was, I remembered before the hypnosis was having this horrible nightmare where my big sister, who was 12 years older than me, took me, a little 4-year-old, out in the middle of the night, and she had 2 friends with her, and I could not see the friends' faces. I couldn't see who they were. They were just kind of shadowy. And she took me out in the middle of the night, and she left me alone under a street lamp on a very dark street, and she said, "Stay here until I come back for you." And so I said, okay. And I stayed there, and I stayed there, and I stayed there, and she didn't come, and she didn't come. And then finally, I got so scared, I just started screaming. And then I woke up in my bed screaming. So that was the memory that I had. I told Bud about it because it had really stuck in my mind. And so when we looked at it, actually that was an abduction. I remember saying under hypnosis, wow, it's nighttime, and the bedroom is full of light. Because there was all this light coming in the window, and then I was levitated right out of the bed through the ceiling into the craft. And there I underwent some kind of examination with something that resembled an ultrasound in the abdominal area.
Yes.
And I can only assume from what I've studied of the phenomenon and the hybridization program, is they were checking out my female organs to see if they were what was needed for their research purposes.
Now, did you ever ask your sister about? I mean, did you ever conclude that she was or was not actually involved in the abduction itself?
I never was able to do that, and my sister is a very different individual to me, and it's not something I would be very comfortable to approach her about. And
yeah, I can appreciate that. I will share with you. I did an interview with a gentleman who is in his early 60s, and he's a great guy, and told me of his own childhood experiences. In which he was about 4 or 5 years old, about the age that you were, and he had an older kind of a cousin, not quite a sister, but like that. She was in her mid-teens. So again, this is very similar to your sister. And he said he used to remember she would come in his room in the middle of the night and say, "Okay, we're going outside now to the school bus." And in his backyard, there would be, at night, in the middle of the night, there would be the school bus, but it wasn't a school bus, and he would go on a ride. And he had these very explicit memories of being taken to a place in this, quote, bus, which was not a bus. And what he was obviously having were very bizarre experiences where he was unable to see the faces of the people that were talking to him. He said he was only able to look up to basically the knee or the waist level, and he was not able to see their face. And he had a series of these. And when you're describing your own experiences, I couldn't help but think of this other individual. I just have to think, I'm wondering, is there some broader pattern that at least at that particular time was going on? This man's a little bit older than you, but it's a kind of a similar general time period here, and I have to wonder if there was some kind of program where siblings were used, whether in reality or in one's mind, to take these little kids out and to kind of test them.
Well, it could be because, I trusted my sister. My sister, we had a crazy kind of alcoholic codependent family, and I'm very much a true starseed in that I'm like the cuckoo, who went and laid her egg in a nest and then flew off and left the baby to be raised by a different family. I'm definitely very much like that. So my family is so different from me. I mean, it's a difference of night and day. So anyway, I just throw that in there. And my sister, I would just have to say that if my sister had really been on a ship, I kind of think she wasn't. I think they were just using an image of her, because I remember seeing her standing on a ship and she looked so calm. And I'm thinking, if she was standing in this real place, she would not be calm.
Okay.
And that was my first clue that something was not quite kosher with my sister's image on the ship.
Right. I mean, unless, of course, they just calmed her down in their own way.
That's possible. You
never know. It's really quite fascinating. So you remembered this event from very early on, and it did require some regression years later with Bud Hopkins. You included the transcripts of a number of these regressions, and I must say, when people want to criticize the efficiency of abductions or the accuracy of regression, I didn't get the idea in any of these transcripts that you were being led in any way by the person conducting the regression. It just seemed to me that what they were able to do for you is to put you in a greater state of relaxation just so that you were able to remember things. Is that your sense?
That was my sense. And hypnosis is an unusual process where sometimes when you're under hypnosis, you just feel like you're deeply relaxed and, partially asleep. But you say these things and it just kind of moves up out of the subconscious. And sometimes the subconscious will put things out that the conscious mind will go, "What? Are you kidding? Yikes." I need to filter that, I
always feel careful. I feel cautious with some regression testimony. I do.
Yeah.
I do have some experience, at least in studying this, in which it seems to me that some of these regressions can be confabulated. I think it's absolutely possible that it can be. On the other hand, you have to wonder when someone comes up with something that is of such detail and such logical detail, which actually is the case with your regression transcripts.
Yeah.
I think we have to acknowledge the likelihood that the person's recalling something that actually did happen. Certainly, it can be the case that it's accurate.
Well, again, applying at least some scientific method, what comes out of the hypnosis session, it's a block of information, and then you take that information and you start looking. Well, is there correlating data? Are there other experiences and other testimony that say similar things? Because if there is, then it needs a serious look. If there isn't correlating testimony or other data out there in support of what you've said, then you need to toss it out, whether you believe it or not.
Exactly. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So what's next of importance in as you're retracing your life and the weirdness and the experiences that you've had? Where do you think you want to go next with this?
Where to go next? Well, the experience, I'll go ahead and dive into that experience that we were talking about Germany.
Yeah.
That was because this is kind of controversial, and this is probably difficult for a lot of people to talk about, but I'm a little more comfortable talking about it because I've led workshops in healthy sexuality and so on and so forth. But it seems to me, from all my experiences and research and reading, and that I was used as a person to help the hybridization program, and it seemed like I was also being used to collect data on human sexuality. And the Greys, I think, did things to make me a little bit more highly sexed individual. And then I think that they have implants or had implants in me to take readings of neuropeptide levels, hormone levels, all the different neurological and emotional and chemical things that go on in the body during a sexual experience. I think they were collecting all that data so that as they were working on their hybrids and hooking up the genetics just so, that their hybrids would come out with the correct feeling, emotion, and motivation, physical motivations to sexually perform.
Got it.
And so this instance in Germany that we were discussing was, I was in bed, still asleep. My husband had gone to work. He was in the army in Germany, and he's
1975,
yeah,
I think, right?
Yeah, I think about then. And so I'm asleep in the bed, and I woke up having an absolutely explosive orgasm, all by myself in the bed, nothing going on, just waking up, boom. And I looked around the bedroom, and my face was beet red. I was just laying there in bed, embarrassed that I had such an experience all alone in my own bedroom. And I was blown away. I thought, what on earth happened, And I was having a dream at the time of this Rudolph Valentino chic character from, that comes striding into the tent, in those old silent movies. And I just thought, what on earth? And I always wondered about it. And then later on, as I got more memories back from hypnosis and started researching, it took years, but, I began to connect the dots and just put it together that if they're doing a hybridization program, then they probably need study and research subjects to make sure that their hybrids are put together the right way.
Right. But you, at the time, you had kind of a vague kind of visual of what your dream, let's call it a dream, was. But then years later, you went through a regression on this, and what did you uncover?
What I uncovered was I was asleep in the bed, and I was having an experience where there was sexual contact between me and a hybrid being that was going on, and then an actual gray, and not a hybrid, but a gray, was actually floating over me and observing me while I was going through the sexual experience.
Correct.
Yeah.
You described the hybrid as I'm recalling, with very dark eyes, but then it would seem to change appearance. It was almost as if it was kind of creating some illusion for you. That's the impression.
Well, it could. Yeah, they were extremely vivid blue eyes, and kind of dark blue.
Okay.
And he was something. He did seem to have just a shred or two of emotion, and he seemed to sense when I was uncomfortable. And he would kind of put a hand on me somewhere in kind of a comforting gesture.
But he didn't seem in your recollection, in the hypnotic recollection, that he was like this absolute hunk movie star that woman would want to. But he had an ability to create intense arousal. Yeah,
he did have an ability to do that, and definitely not a hunk. In fact, that gave me another kind of issue, which is, when sex feels good, you just want to go for it.
Right.
But when you're with a being that's not human and looks very strange and very different from a normal human man, it's like it's like one foot on the brake and one foot on the accelerator. You want to go with the good feeling, but your other foot is saying, put on the brakes here because this isn't a human.
This is bizarre. Well, hold that thought. We're at the top of the hour. We're going to go to a break here, but I want to come back to this and continue with this, and then we'll keep moving on to some of your other experiences and draw some conclusions. I'm Richard Dolan. I'm here with Niara Isley, author of the new book, Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light. This is the Richard Dolan Show on KGRA Radio. We'll be right back.